That's weird. You guys literally just seeing my hand on this screen? It's not what that's supposed to look like. Is that what you guys see? You don't see the disclosure, right? You like literally see my hand. Alright, I think I should be all good now. If someone is able to listen in on the YouTube, I would appreciate that. Because like I said, I'm operating on a different system here. Just VTF is disclosure, YouTube is disclosure. Just want to know if the YouTube sound's alright. Think so? Alright. Well then, let's get started. I am an associated member of Team 3 Trading Group, which is an SEC registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA/SIPC. All trades are placed by, you should carefully consider whether trading is suitable to in light of your own financial condition. Overmodulated, reduced volume. I don't even know what that means. I'm getting. Mic sounds weird, it's in and out. It might not be. Input controls. You guys know I know nothing about computers. It's much better. Okay. Let me kind of an older laptop right now because I never replaced that more quality laptop I had that got stolen when I was in Spain. But anyway, this was just supposed to be a temporary fix here for a couple of days. So. Alright, let's hop in. SPYs here closed down 0.14%, positive 0.1%. Looks like the Q's catching a small bit after hours here though. Q's probably in the green by a little bit. Looks like we rallied for the last 10 minutes of the day into the close, and that's what helped the Russell to close green. Okay, so let's have a review of what this market did today and a review of our game plan and see if our game plan was on point or not. So today I was arguing that our uptrend, but pulling back here on the 16th, you could argue that today is a day 4. Our short-term tactical sent buy, it means probably don't short or be very cautious or patient on your shorting. And if you're looking to buy, you want to make sure that you've got the extension that's appropriate and the signal to actually come in and do it, because it would be on the short time frame a counter trade. Yesterday was a big day for the market. I'm sure Pat went over it in detail in yesterday's afternoon meeting when I was on the road. Yesterday was an important day for the market because we broke multiple levels of major support. So it's a big breakdown candle, negative 100. The Qs and the IWMs. Today I was expecting more follow through. We had a small common gap up this morning, but I didn't think that short-term tactical sentiment in the green zone. We were extended at the open from the 80 and we can't continue, but extended enough where it's difficult to short. So what I really wanted today was an early bounce back. To manage that early bounce back by being long some relatively strong stocks. I think that's something that a few of us were able to do off the open. But I thought the better trade was hit a bounce for the first hour of the day or so. That's going to satisfy that short-term tactical sentiment indicator. It's going to make us less extended on the daily chart. And the SPYs were slow-moving compared to the IWM and Qs, which were a little bit stronger. But the SPYs only got to 400 half in the beginning of the day on that opening bounce. They were really weak. The Q longer bounce. For the Qs, I was really looking for 296.50 to begin to look for that short signal. So I never really quite covered this. Some early extension here that you could have tried to short these Qs kind of versus highs and maybe catch that a little bit. I know Brian, Cold Smoke Brian in the VTF was all over the short off of the pullback on this candle, on the 950 candle, which was great execution. Empty at 29.15. Maybe I was just a little bit too conservative on the short side. I do have that habit of being too conservative on the short side, but the thought process was absolutely correct. Even if the execution wasn't perfect. The thought process of, let's look for that opening balance to satisfy some of the downside extension, satisfy short-term tactical sentiment, and then we can look for the short setup for bigger picture continuation to actually come into play. So again, we didn't quite get to the levels where I wanted to really look for that short signal, but if you were a bit more aggressive than I was, you could have caught attention a retracement trade to come in. And I was a little early with the call. I was kind of making that call, I think, at like 10:10 to 10:15, where we did get a little bit of a bounce followed by new lows. Not everything made new lows. The Qs were able to make new lows, but some of the stuff that I was like secondary long call out in Google right here off this little higher low, and the real information on this trade and with Amazon came in off the relative strength. So Amazon had fantastic relative strength early on, by the way, and I almost forgot about this. We had a great call out for this inside 5 and up continuation trade for Amazon, and also Sharir had a great call for AI long versus second candle low. So those were some good momentum trades there pretty early on. But it was this relative strength in Amazon that helped with this strength here. If we compare Google at 1025 and 1030 candles versus the Qs at 1025 and 1030 candles, you can see this big lower high here. You look at Google on the same candles, it's not even pulling back on the first one, and the second one is actually giving a higher low. So that gave me the call out for Google long versus this low, which I know some of you guys were involved in, which was another excellent trade. So a few things were a little too early. Another one that I called that was a little bit too early at 10:15. So I don't know if anybody was able to capture Tesla. Again, that first call was a little bit too early. Pins was another one that I called at that time, also off the relative strength at 10:10 a.m. when the market was kind of making a nicely shaped kind of continuation hammer, which the market. That's a lot of what I'm doing, right? I'm comparing continuation, and I look to kind of get some sales. There are like 2 or 3 names called out, all side 5s on the second 5-minute candle of the day for that continuation. And the short, I know some of you guys caught it. I was looking for a little bit more. And then finally was the pretty much calling the low of the day for a long to get back in. It's too early. And some of the names that I kind of called out, even though I was trying to look at things that were relatively strong, worked better than others. So I think that was great. I think that for a while that was probably so hard, but we navigated extremely well. And then a little bit after that, we got this market just died. The market and the midday trading session we know is always a little bit slower, especially on a Fed day. We got FOMC minutes, which is not really as big as a Fed day. We got FOMC minutes coming out today, but this was brutal. This was absolutely brutal between 11 and 2. There was nothing going on. This market was completely flatlined. Entire range is so tight. 2 o'clock comes around, much ado about nothing. A lot of volatility. To me, it looked like nothing. Should still look at a 50 basis point hike at some point. But for the most part, the FOMC minutes today was really much ado about nothing. And we eventually kind of settled lower off the FOMC where we are for the big picture of the market. Big picture of the market right now in the small time frame has become neutral to bearish. We're continuing to work our way down. It was only yesterday that we had a major breakdown day for the market. Today we had to satisfy some of that downside extension on the daily chart, satisfy the short-term tech 398.60. It looks like that's where we are right now. The EDMA on the daily chart is at 405.50. I'd love a big gap down tomorrow. I was actually hoping we would close at lows. We ended up not closing at lows because we had that 10-minute rally into the close. But I was hoping for a close on lows and a gap down, to be totally honest. I think Pat was too when he was chatting in the last 30 minutes of the day to everyone on the virtual trading floor. Because if we could have gotten this close at lows, which is where we just about were, we're at 397 with the 80 band 405.50. If we get a close on lows coupled with a gap down, that'd be something to be a little bit more excited about. Like if we could have closed at 397 and opened up at 394, that would be something where we would really be coming in, and we'd be at that, $10 or so of downside extension. We'd be looking at either a day 3 or a day 5, depending on how you want to look at it on the daily chart, to the downside. And that would be one, I think, to be a much more aggressive dip buyer into a weak close followed by a gap down tomorrow. At this point, are we going to get it? Most of the time, not always, but most of the time when we start hitting those, you really want that gap in a certain direction, you don't actually get it. Because the market doesn't usually like to give us layups. Every once in a while, the market will give you a layup, but for the most part, sorry, Funny Shark on YouTube, I'm just on temporary setup here for a couple of days. Cool. So that is all I've got for you guys today. Again, I think it was very well navigated for the price section that we had. We had some really good call outs for the most part. We managed the market well, and I guess that's it. So from DJ, hindsight aside, do you think the candle on Airbnb, and I forgot to even talk about, let's talk about, some of these other ones, right? We're looking at Roku for a long today. I don't know if anybody was able to capture that. That was pretty good. Shopify was a focus of mine today. It was a little tricky, but I was able to make a few bucks. So we're kind of looking at some of these post-earnings names, particularly your Roku, your Airbnb, your Trade Desks, the ones that had gapped up really big on those reports and are now testing the ADMA on the daily chart for the first time. But anyway, on a chart. Oh, look at that setup. I missed this one. 10:10 a.m. was the biggest dip buying opportunity of the day today. There was a lot of long call outs at that time that we were looking at. I was trying to look at more of these relatively strong names, but Airbnb is relatively strong on the daily chart, even if it was weak intraday today. So recognizing this chart, would that have been a justifiable entry? To me, Pat greatly prefers for his hammer candlesticks to be green. Personally, I don't care. It's perfectly fine. Yeah, I guess maybe ideally buyers were in control driving this thing up. They just ran out of time. If they had an extra minute or 2 minutes, this candle would have actually closed green, and then you'd have an even bigger hammer. So I just want this candle to be at least half of the total of the candle itself for the tail, and that's what I'm looking for the trade. So I'm very happy with what this setup looks like. I almost feel like it's an A-type trade, to be honest. That was NVIDIA. Numbers. Hemming on Baidu. This Baidu was mind-blowing to me. I took a small loss in a Baidu trade today. It was somewhat way down here outside tail, but the bar didn't close yet, and I bought some and just put the low of that candle, and I was stopped out. I was stopped out very quickly, which is a good thing because the stock worked its way all the way down to 135 or whatever, and I got so happy with that. But I was really mind blown at the degree to which they sold that news. I thought that the earnings report, and especially the buyback, but that's why it's never enough just to go based on the story and the thesis. You have to combine that story and thesis with the technicals. Maybe the market already knew that Baidu was probably going to be coming out with a big buyback or something like that. I really don't know why they sold this to the way that they did. So you really want to just make sure that you have your technical signal. So let me read the rest of your question. Do you think I missed anything in it? You're looking for an opportunity, or I should consider shorting it. It went from 151 quarter to like 135. It's a massive down move. I don't care. I see no short entry in this Baidu. No inside down for continuation. Did not stop selling. And that's actually the problem sometimes when you have what I thought was an excellent report coupled with a solid buyback. There was no reason to go short it. You can't look at this stock in hindsight and say there was no reason to think that. Tech thesis, I certainly had it. But if there's no setup for the long, you can't really be going long either. Up above 110, and I remember someone mentioned it right away at the open, and I was like, oh wow, they gapped it above 110, but it's too extended, I don't want to buy it. So Merck had an upgrade, just for background information, great relative strength for 2 days in a row, 110's resistance, and then it got upgraded this morning. You want that to be the catalyst that leads to continuation of that strength, especially if the market's able to show any degree of strength, which the market showed a little strength early on, and then a little strength kind of later in the morning. But this thing, they gapped it up above 110. I thought the extension was too big. I wanted to be patient. They instantly sold it below 110. Okay, fine. Glad I'm being patient. Maybe I can try to buy it back through 110, and it just ticks to 109.85, and it's giving a tail, and it's bouncing back, and it's just part of the process of satisfying the big upside extension through 110. It just got destroyed all the way down to the long side. I support that. I particularly support it because of how whoever it was that was trading that long, I honestly don't remember who called it out. Red negative Mariposa was immediately negated by this solid green candle, so you're going long versus those lows. I get it, especially into the gap fill. I would argue that they should never have sold this thing down to 109 or whatever this low is. So I ended up never getting involved in it. I didn't like how it looked off the open. This was a difficult trade that worked for people who took it. I didn't love it enough to be involved. And then when it was back up at 110, I just wasn't ecstatic about it and never kind of got involved. Let me read the rest of your question. Merck was my number one focus today. It broke the 110 at open level, but did not hold. And it took a lot of pain in the first 10 minutes. Then was able to get out on the way up, but at a loss. I know it was on your radar. Did you take it? The answer is no. What could I have seen to just stop fighting it and focus on other things that were not moving, that were moving? Like I had coin short after exhaustion on radar, but I missed it because I was trying to manage this Merc. Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of like I said, and I think it's the feedback I gave in real time when I typed it up off the open. You got this potential breakaway gap above 110. I thought it was too extended, so I didn't want to be involved. If you do get involved above 110 off the open in Merc today, I think you've got two options. Option number one is to be heavy versus 110. Be heavy versus 110, with that as your stop, or 109.99, and look for the momentum to come in to pay you. And recognize that it's a momentum trade and you're buying extension, hoping that the stock becomes even more extended because it's a breakaway gap on an upgrade. That's option number one. Option number two is, whereas I didn't want to buy it at all because of that degree of extension, if you really liked this Merc, which it sounds like you did, then you buy very small off the open. You go, okay, I really like this Merc. It's above 110. I'm going to buy really small here with a game plan where maybe I got to give this thing all the way down to the gap fill. I'm going to give it some real room. I'm going to let that ADMA catch up. I'm going to see what the first pivot looks like on it. And I can hold this thing down to a gap fill if I needed to. And it's not going to hurt me too bad because of how light I am. But the idea is to look for the entry to get heavier. And if you did that way, well, you never got begin off lows here when a couple of you guys were kind of calling out some stop loss for everything. I think those are the only two ways to do it. I think if you're really heavy and you're giving a lot of room because it's that extended in harm's way, that's my thought process on it. From DJ, I think also the fact that it's sloppier, more expensive stock means you can be a little less particular. Technicals, kind of regardless of liquidity and volatility, you just need to recognize that when you're trading a name that's a little thinner or is a little more volatile, that sometimes it's going to be higher risk, higher reward broadly. I think that the technicals are the technicals. As long as it's a stock that's liquid enough to trade, which I'm pretty sure Airbnb is. What's the typical volume this thing does? Yeah, well over 1 million shares. NVIDIA bounced back a little bit. I'm still not seeing any real movement out of this NVIDIA. That leads me to believe that the report's out. Gilbert pointing out that Roku made a really strong inside day today. Okay, yep, notable off that ADMA. So let's pay attention for that for tomorrow. I'm definitely a fan. Kyle on IQ. When I mentioned IQ in the morning meeting, you said it was an ADR, which are hard to trade. Are ADRs non-US traded securities like Chinese names? Was a bit confused on what exactly ADRs are. Sure, so ADR stands for American Depository Receipt, and it's a stock that is a non-American company that's trading on our exchange. Most ADRs, they trade on our exchanges and our market in addition to trading on the foreign market like their home country. Most of them. So that's why I don't like trading most ADRs. Like anything that's like European, as an example, or Japanese, trading Toyota. Anything that's an ADR like this, because they have, you can see that these charts aren't continuous compared to like a typical chart, and that's because it's gapping based on how it traded overseas. And what you end up getting is a much wider gap range and a much smaller intraday range because of that. The exception to that had always been the Chinese companies. The Chinese companies, just to use Alibaba as an example, were forever only listed in the United States. It didn't trade overseas, so it traded very continuous, just like an American stock does. Listings, even though that came secondary to their American listing. So now with the Hong Kong listing, the stock range is tighter. It's not that they're untradeable, it's just that the range is tighter on the intraday, which means less reward potential for your risk. And if you need to then keep it overnight, if you do any swing trading like I do, that's what I was saying in the morning meeting. I used to trade Alibaba, JD, Baidu, like all the time. And now I really don't. They've become so much more difficult to trade since the Hong Kong listings. Now, I'm not sure if IQ is a Hong Kong listing. You have to do your own research on that. The chart looks like it doesn't, actually. This chart looks much more continuous than Alibaba does, or JD does. I know this JD is a Hong Kong listing. Just look at these gaps all over the place. IQ, I'm not really seeing that. It'll still move broadly based on the overall Chinese market to a degree. They still have a lower correlation to the S&P. So maybe this IQ is still more tradable. So if you check to see if it has a Hong Kong listing, I hope that helps with your question. Did QS not break the inside day? Wow, it's 4 inside days in a row for QS. I.e. an inside 5, and then continuation. Would this selling be technically a momentum trade to the downside? Trying to learn the difference. Well, so every trade needs a trade setup. So all trades have trade setups. So you're referencing momentum trades. That's like a very broad type of trade, right? You got trend trades, momentum trades, counter trend trades. Like, and there's a lot of trades that kind of fall within those categories. Baidu exhibited downside momentum today, but I don't see any way to have known that Baidu would have downside momentum today before the market opened. And then even if you still need an actual execution setup for the momentum trade. And that could be an example of a momentum execution setup is an inside 5 for continuation, like what we had in Amazon. And there was one other inside 5 and up off the open, and I can't. Strong momentum takes a 5-minute break, and you're looking for continuation of. There's nothing. It was just straight down. No problem, Mike. Are we still waiting on the video? Wow. Diego letting us know that, Bobby, you can see the Hong Kong listing on investing.com. 99.88. This was similar to the Tesla one, where it just made. I was calling some of these longs out at 10.10, and a bunch of them made new lows at I think 10.15. I think Tesla did the exact same thing, right? Yeah, Tesla had the 10.15 low after the 10.10 low, so I was just slightly too early on my broad bounce call out. But if you went long Meta, off the 10.10 candle, I don't hate it. I don't love it either because it's not giving me that same setup necessarily, I feel like, as the market did. But you're buying kind of with the more. Oh, S170 support. Never mind. That makes me like it a lot more. Breaks 170. Market looks like it wants to give that bounce. I actually like that trade a lot. I take back what I originally said, and it would have pushed you out on the next candle. Let me read. Stopped out by 10.16 by a few cents. It dropped to 169.69 and then rallied the rest of the day. Is there anything I missed to more, or are there are things I should have waited to see before entering. Yeah, no, I like your trade a lot, Zachary. That's when I was calling out for the longs. And again, like I said, when I was doing the bigger portion of the meeting and kind of reviewing the day, that long setup, when I called it out, I was like just slightly too early on calling out that bounce, and that bounce actually turned out to be the low of the day for many stocks, but I was slightly too early in the call out, unfortunately. So it was kind of a mixed bag depending on which stock you got in. Like Amazon held, pins worked, but a couple other ones like Tesla I had to looking at. So I love the thought process, especially if you're coupling it with the daily chart 170 support for Meta, which is a level that we're looking at. I really like your thought process in the trade. It's just like I said, for a few of them, it was a little too early, and they kind of gave that one more push down before the bounce came out. So if you got stopped out at Meta at the low, if you got stopped out at Tesla at the low, if you got stopped out at Google at the low, I don't think that any of those were bad trades. Anybody can give me further feedback on it. I know originally the mic was no good, and somebody else said that the mic was a struggle as well. Again, I'm just traveling here for a couple of days, so I'm trying to make this work. Tom says it sounds good. I appreciate that. I appreciate that information because I always want to give a good experience, but sometimes it's hard when you're on the road, and I'm on a not so great laptop, but I am working with 3 monitors still. All right, so I will wrap it up there, and then have a wonderful night, everybody, and I will see you all tomorrow. See if we can get that big gap down that we want. We probably won't. Let's see if it happens. Have a great night.